Matthew chapter 7, verses 24 to 29. Jesus is speaking. He says, "Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is like a wise man who built his house on the rock. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. Yet it did not fall, because it had its foundation on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not put them into practice is like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell with a great crash." When Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were amazed at his teaching, because he taught as one who had authority and not as their teachers of the law. I want to talk about living above the storm. Living above the storm. On last week, there were 2 occasions when I could have lost my life. On Tuesday of last week, my mom and I were traveling. My mom was driving and she made a mistake. She turned down a one-way street. But God spared our lives.
Thank you, God.
Well, then Wednesday came. The very next day after Bible study, I was driving my car on the highway. It was dark and it was a storm. A great storm. Darkness was there. It was raining. The wind blew. I could have lost my life then as well. But again, God spared my life. But this particular occasion, it was a different type of storm for me. As I said, it was dark and the wind was blowing, the rain was coming down, visibility was poor. And I don't know about you, but the older you get, the more difficult it is to drive in the dark. And not to mention, when it's raining, this was a storm. But I wasn't the only one living in a storm. There were people around me in the storm as well. And I watched as we all responded in our own way to the storm. Some people, they turned on their hazard lights. Some people, they got off on the closest exit. Some people, they parked their cars on the side of the road. And then there were others who drove through the storm. We had the freedom to respond to the storm in our own way. Jesus realized that the people that he was talking to in this text, they had the freedom to respond in their own way. Because Jesus knows human nature. He was so patient with these people. He took the time to teach them. He cared, so he wanted them to know the best way to respond to the storm. In this text, we see his dedication. We see his love on how he instructs people to remain despite the storm. Life can be like a storm sometimes. Life can be a great storm. Some of us, even now, we're dealing with the storm of racism and white supremacy in America. Life can be like a storm. Some among us are dealing with sickness. Some of us are dealing with a storm of underemployment and some unemployment. Some are dealing with the storm of poverty. Some are dealing with the storm of violence and health care issues. Some of us are dealing with storms that we cannot even speak of. Life is like a storm. So then Jesus is here and he gives this story of the wise builder and the foolish builder. After this teaching, Jesus knows that these people can choose to leave after this instruction as fools, or they can leave as wise people.
Come on now.
They can choose to live above the storm, building their lives on the rock, or they can choose to live beneath the storm, building their lives on the sand. Now see, this might seem like an easy teaching. I mean, after all, who doesn't know the difference between a rock and sand? I mean, come on, is this, Jesus? This is so simple. Who doesn't know? But every Sunday, we hear the preacher preach. Every Sunday, we listen to the Sunday school teacher. Every year, we have Christian education Sundays, and people are still leaving our churches as fools.
Amen.
So before we write this off as an easy teaching, I wonder, humanity, if we really know what it is to live above the storm. So many people want to live above the storm, but don't want to take the instruction that it takes to live above the storm. So we're living beneath where we need to be. Even Christians can be naive to the gravity of storms.
Amen.
Many times people don't even prepare for storms. We even see it on television. People will say you need to evacuate because the storm is coming. But there are some who sit there and they say, we shall not be moved, but the storm is coming. Even believers, oh no, there's not a storm coming in my life because I'm a Christian. I have storm-proof insurance. But read your Bible. Jesus said in John 16:33, in this world there will be tribulation. Trouble is coming. What do you do to prepare for the storm? Have you even thought about it? Jesus in this text does not say if the storm comes. Jesus says the rain came down. It's already here. He said that the streams rose. Life is going to bring trouble after trouble after trouble. I was in a storm last week. I have sense enough to know that I'll find myself in a storm again.
Amen.
So when I find myself in my next storm, I have to be so careful not to say out of my mouth, the devil is busy. Let me tell you what I mean. People are so busy talking about the busyness of the devil. As if God is on a break. Be careful because you see, the devil is thirsty for your attention. I like young people use that word thirsty. Thirsty is when someone greatly desires a relationship or affection from another person. The devil is thirsty. Every time we give the devil so much of our attention, the devil is happy because see, we're not recognizing how busy the Lord is. God knows the nature of every storm that we will face. God is busy even in the midst of the storm, yet and still we're so busy talking about the actions of the devil. But let me tell you about the actions of God. God is aware of the storm. You see, God knows even about the quiet storm. You know, a quiet storm is where there's just a few drops of rain in your life. It's the soft storm. You know, the quiet storm? The kind that, you know, you can even rest in. You just get a little comfortable. You don't even realize it was a storm until you wake up in the morning and you say, oh my goodness, something happened out here. God knows that something is happening. He knows about the quiet storm. Keeps God busy. God knows about the fast storm. Trees, they blow, and before you know it, you get caught in the storm. You look around and you say, the sun was just shining in my life. Then it seemed like one thing after another thing after another thing. The fast storm has hit my life. God knows about the fast storm. God is busy. And not to mention the hot and volatile storm. The kind of storm where the lightning is so bright it hurts your eyes, and the thunder roars and it permeates the quiet. Hot storm, the wind screams and the rain batters your windows. God knows about the hot and the volatile storm. God is busy. God is still busy even through the storm. When the rain falls, God covers you. When the streams rise, God lifts you. When the wind blows, God protects you. When it beats down, God fights for you. God is busy. What are we busy doing in between storms? storm? Or are we giving the enemy so much of our attention that we don't even recognize the work of God in our lives? Even when we're in a storm, even when I am sick, even when I don't have a job, even when there's issues in my family, God is still able. Amen. God is still present. God is still hearing. God still knows. God still cares. But we have to do something. Jesus says, those who hear what I'm saying, those who hear what I am saying. Now, there were a group of people there when Jesus was saying this. And the fact is, Jesus was talking about all of these different things. Even if you go to chapter 6, Jesus was still preaching and still teaching. Some would say it's one of the longest sermons ever. So it may have been challenging to hear because there were so many other voices around. Even while Jesus was teaching and preaching, Jesus was talking, but maybe there were other voices because, my goodness, Jesus, you just talked about giving to the needy, and then you talked about prayer, you talked about fasting, treasures in heaven, you told us not to worry, you talked about judging others, this whole idea of ask, seek, and knock, you talked about the narrow and the wide gates, you talked about true and false prophets. I'm tired of listening to that sermon. You know how sermons can be long sometimes. To the point where you start to listen even to the other voices around you. God is always in competition with other voices. Amen. We hear so many things from day to day. God is trying to get us to tune in to what I'm saying. 2017, are you hearing me? Don't drop out from hearing me. And I know that human beings have a short attention span. But we give God our full attention when we get in trouble.
Yes, we do.
I'm in a storm, Lord. I need you. I'm in a storm, Lord. I'm listening to you now. I'm in a storm, Lord, and if you get me out of this, come on now, I'll listen. But what I love about God is that God's grace and mercy, it never ends. So even when I'm not hearing and I'm not listening and I'm not recognizing God, God gives me another chance.
Amen. Amen.
Because God understands that even when human beings are in a room with one another, we can be sitting with one person, but there's so many other people in the room. We hear all of the other voices, but we must learn to tune in to the one person that's talking to us. It's the same when it comes to God. Regardless of what's going on, Jesus wanted them to tune in. Living above the storm, you're going to have to hear. But not just hear. Jesus says you have to put the words into practice. Amen. Put the words into practice. The difference between a fool and a wise person is obedience to God.
Come on now.
It's that simple. The making of a fool is a person who says there is no God. The making of a fool is a person who is not obedient to God. The making of a fool is when the world convinces you that you can do whatever it is that you want to do. This is 2017. We ought to be politically correct. We ought not really preach the truth of Jesus Christ. We ought to accept everything. That's really the making of a fool.
Come on now.
Life puts us through tests and trials, but when we put God's word into practice, it has to do with our actions. It has to do with our actions. It's not about our education. It's not about our class. It's not about gender. It's not about race, but it's about what we do after studying the Bible. I did not say what we do after reading the Bible. Anyone can read the Bible as long as they're literate. But no. Study the Bible. What we do after we study the Bible. Christian education is not just about picking up the book and reading it. Christian education is about living the words. It's about tasting the words. It's about digesting the words to the point to where when you walk out into the world, you represent exactly who Jesus is. I want to be like Jesus, but I don't want to follow the word of God. No, that's what a fool says. So then God is waiting for Christians to be Christian. Do we know how to tell people about building their lives on the rock today? Do we really know how to tell people about building their lives on the rock today? You know, many people think that the rock is an actor in the Fast and Furious movies. They think that the rock is a wrestler. Do we know, for Christians, do we know how to really tell people about the rock, the solid rock? Yeah. Jesus Christ. Yeah. Do we know how to tell people who Jesus is? Because at the end of the day, the rock is the answer. Yes, sir. The rock, I'm not talking about Dwayne Johnson, the rock. Yeah. Jesus Christ is the answer. I would imagine one of my favorite shows is game shows is Jeopardy. And what I like about Jeopardy is that it features this quiz competition where the contestants are presented with general knowledge of clues in the form of answers. That's what I like about Jeopardy, because they already give you the answer. And then you form the answer in a question. I really like Jeopardy. I like it because it really makes me think. Now, I don't really get many answers right. And I won't tell you that the last time they had a category, the Bible, that I got all those right. Preacher. But nonetheless, I like the show because it challenges my mental capacity. So as I sit there, even when I get the answers wrong, I'm still learning something. So I like Jeopardy, but I told you that I don't always get the answers right, but I wonder how I would be if it was Jesus Jeopardy. I wonder how it would be if you were on the show and it was Jesus Jeopardy. And I imagine that if I am a Christian, I ought to be able to answer something. So if I was on Jesus Jeopardy, I don't know how I would respond, but you know, the one who leads the show, his name is Alex Trebek. And I believe that if I was a contestant on Jesus Jeopardy, I would want to know how well I know how to live above the storm. Do I really know the rock? Yeah. So I believe I stand there and I say, Alex, I'll take Won't He Do It for 100. Alex would say, he'll never leave you nor forsake you. I think I'll buzz and I'll say, what is the rock, Alex? He'll say, correct, McCoy. Choose another category. I say, I'll just stick with Won't He Do It. I'll take Won't He Do It for 200, Alex. Alex would say, he's a present help in the time of trouble. I'd buzz in and I'd say, what is the rock, Alex? He'll say, you got it, McCoy. Do you want to stick with that category? I believe so. I'll take Won't He Do It for 300, Alex. He say, he's a heavy burden bearer. I said, oh, I know I got that. But you see, I've been through some storms, and I know who's able to bear my burdens. So I know I got that answer. It's the rock, Alex. He say, you're right, McCoy. Go on and choose another. I'll say, I'll take Won't He Do It for 400, Alex. He say, he's the savior from sin. I said, oh yes, I'm excited now. You see, because I'm a Christian, so I know that there's only one way to God, and that's Jesus Christ. So the answer is the rock, Alex. He said, you're right again, McCoy. All I'm trying to tell you today is that the world needs to know the real answer. And the answer is the rock. The answer is the solid rock. I don't need a game show clue to tell me who Jesus is to me. Because I know that Jesus is the one who was born. Jesus is the one who lived. Jesus is the one who died and rose again.